The sound of a glass sliding across a kitchen counter isn't usually a sign of danger. But sometimes in the most ordinary rooms, with the most ordinary gestures, fate waits quietly. That summer evening in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a man named Rafael Cortez accepted a drink from his wife the way any husband might. Without hesitation, without suspicion. He lifted it, savoring sweetness that dripped cold down his throat, sighing with relief after a day spent grinding under the punishing desert sun. He thought only of comfort. What followed would leave him clawing at the edges of life, watching the world fade while the woman he loved stood nearby. Now pause with me for a second. Imagine this scene not as a story you're hearing, but as a choice placed in your hands. If the person beside you every night handed you a glass, would you drink without question? Would you even allow the word betrayal to creep into your mind? Drop your answer below in the comments. Could you spot deception from the person you trusted most? Before we go further, if you love stories that pull you in like this, unsettling, cautionary, unforgettable true crime fiction, then take a second right now, hit that subscribe button, and join the True Crime Speaks family. You'll find yourself questioning trust, loyalty, and choices every single week. Now let's go deeper. Rafael Cortez was the kind of man others pointed to when they spoke of reliability. 34 years old, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, his hands roughened by years of laboring in construction, his face bronzed and etched with lines carved by sun and sweat. He was a man forged to endure. He lived for routine, for responsibility, and above all, for love. Every morning he laced his boots before dawn, left for work sites still heavy with dew, and came home caked in dust that spoke more honestly about devotion than any bouquet could. His life revolved around his wife, Lorena Vargas, and anyone who saw them in public would swear theirs was a marriage bound by warmth. Lorena had what others envied: elegance stitched into each movement, eyes that held attention like magnets, a smile that seemed to soften any gathering. Together at neighborhood barbecues, Rafael flipping meat on the grill, while Lorena charmed conversation in flowing summer dresses, they seemed to be the couple destined for forever. Holiday photos showed them framed beneath decorations, fingers locked, laughter frozen in perfect snapshots. To friends and neighbors, they were proof that love worked, that loyalty persisted. But let me ask you directly, do you believe pictures ever tell the full truth? Or do you suspect, as many of us do, that behind smiling faces may hide cracks ready to split? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if you've ever seen a couple who looked perfect on the outside, but shadowed by secrets on the inside. The truth is, the perfection everyone envied was crafted only for public eyes. Behind their door, Lorena's heart burned differently. She looked across their modest home and felt caged, not comforted. While Rafael measured their life in steady savings, careful repairs, and gradual progress, Lorena measured hers by comparisons she could not silence. She saw women draped in jewels strolling into restaurants, couples gliding into events with cars that reflected status, not survival. And each time she measured herself against them, she burned with a sharper desire. What she didn't have pressed into her tighter than what she did. Rafael didn't notice at first. He trusted too completely. Too often, men like Rafael interpret discontent as fatigue, not betrayal. But Lorena's silence in her mind grew loud until it found an outlet. Another man, wealthier, smoother, carrying the intoxicating promise of a lifestyle dressed in excess. What began in small glances blossomed into an affair that surged with passion and gifts. For Lorena, it was escape. For Rafael, still ignorant, it was a betrayal turning quietly in shadows. Now let me turn again to you. If you discovered a partner hungering for more than you could provide, where do you think responsibility rests? With the unmet need or with the betrayal itself? Do you think financial struggle justifies wandering hearts? Or is loyalty tested most when life isn't glamorous? Drop your thoughts below. I'm curious which side you stand on. Lorena considered her options. Lovers seeking endings face 3 paths: endure quietly, leave openly, or destroy covertly. Enduring didn't appeal. Her hunger clawed too fiercely. Leaving through divorce was shameful under her roof. A separation meant splitting wealth, inviting whispers, dragging her reputation through the dirt. But the third path promised her complete freedom with no baggage shackling her. All it demanded was Raphael's disappearance. She began to flirt with a thought older than her own conscience: poison. This part of her story is not unique in method. History is littered with betrayals committed against dinner tables and bedside cups. But hers was sharpened by obsession. Weeks turned into months of research. The glow of her laptop became her confidant at night. Search bars filled with words nobody expected from her fingers. Painless toxins, dosage tables, undetectable killers. And through her lover's contacts, she acquired what she thought was perfect. For Raphael, nights passed as they always had, returning late, dust clinging to boots, sweat streaking his arms, a smile tightening despite exhaustion. To Lorena, every return was one step closer to her liberation. Though Raphael slept peacefully after long days, Lorena lay awake rehearsing the move that would complete her plan. Let me ask you again. Would you ever notice such planning if it were aimed against you? Could any of us detect treachery in someone's eyes while they kiss us goodnight? Or are betrayals always invisible until their sting pierces? Right below. Have you ever felt suspicion that someone near you wasn't what they seemed? And if you're still with me, I want you to pause for just a second and smash that like button. It helps spread this story to more people, and in a way protects others from missing the lessons these twisted tales carry. The evening she chose carried no warning signs for Raphael. Dinner was simple, as always. He came in, sweat still drying against his shirt, shoulders heavy after work. She greeted him with uncharacteristic warmth, voice soft, expression open, and offered him a tall glass of hibiscus tea, sweetened heavily as he always preferred. He looked at her, grateful. He lifted the glass, not seeing her eyes flicker for a moment as he drank. He thought only of love, but within 30 minutes, his faith in her became betrayal, written in agony. It came sudden. His body stiffened, chest clamped tight, as if iron bands coiled around his ribs. His lungs fought as if drowning without water. His limbs jerked violently, boots scraping against tile as he collapsed full weight onto the floor. Foam bubbled at his lips, and his eyes shot wide, veins snaking crimson across the whites. Through dizziness, Raphael tried to summon her name. At first a whisper, then strangled vowels. But no complete word left his throat. He searched her face, confusion flooding his pupils. And what he saw, though blurred, did not match terror. Lorena's performance faltered only when outsiders entered. When alone, her eyes held not panic, but calculation. Yet moments later, screams tore through the walls. She clutched her phone tight, shrieked into it, sobbed convincingly as neighbors peered curiously through windows. By the time paramedics arrived, Lorena was bent over Raphael, hands pressed against him like a grieving wife risking everything to save her beloved. Her cries seemed authentic. "Please do something," she begged. Paramedics rushed. Needles pierced veins, oxygen masks sealed tight. Observers saw only devotion. Behind their hurried movements, Raphael's consciousness was slipping, black swallowing his sight. He drifted, hearing disjointed sounds of orders, tires screeching as ambulance whisked him away. At the hospital, white lights burst overhead as professionals swarmed. They whispered likelihoods not in favor of survival. The poison, though unidentified, had ravaged him mercilessly. Organs starved of oxygen, brain battered by seizures. The prognosis was heavy. Should he live at all, he would linger as an empty frame. Lorena sat in waiting rooms with shaking shoulders, dabbing glittering tears, earning sympathetic glances from strangers. But Raphael did not die. He plunged into coma, suspended in an endless cage of silence. Now I want to pause and turn this toward you. Think carefully. If given the choice, would you prefer to pass quickly in such a moment? Or would you cling to life, even if it chained you to machines for years? Which do you think is the greater mercy, a fast ending or a long fight? Comment below. Months stretched into years. His body remained, tubes sustaining life, nurses tending him with professional tenderness. Days became seasons. Summer heat turned to winter snow beyond hospital windows. Time marched, uncaring, while Raphael's existence was reduced to statistics on charts. At first, visits came often, family and friends arriving with flowers, touching his hand, whispering prayers. But repetition dulls devotion. As months bled into years with no movement, visits shrank, first weekly, then monthly, until at last, rare. Even a brother quietly confessed it was too painful to see him still. And Lorena? For the outside world, she carried her grief nobly. She wore black dresses, lowered her eyes in public as though respect bound her still. For a year, she played her role with determination. Neighbors commended her resilience, murmured kind words about her loyalty, but grief tarnishes with time when it is false. Slowly, smiles peeked through her veils. Soon after, whispers surfaced, sightings of her with another man, a wealthy businessman whose name surfaced alongside hers too often. At first, she excused it as friendship. Then, when hands intertwined publicly, the facade cracked deliberately. Within years, Lorena remarried. No more shades of mourning concealed her. She embraced jewelry on wrists, dinners in fine halls, vacations abroad stamped across photographs. She carried herself not as widow preserved in loss, but as queen ascending into the seat she always longed for. Courts viewed Raphael's coma as irreversible, authorizing her partial control of shared property. A woman once of modest life, now bathed in luxury. Let me ask you this. Do you think communities are blind or complicit? Did neighbors truly not suspect Lorena's sudden transition? Or did they turn away because it was easier than confrontation? Write in the comments what you believe. Do people really miss signs, or do they choose comfort in silence? Back in Santa Fe Medical Center, however, Raphael still lived. 10 years, an entire decade. He lay quiet. Machines hummed steadily. Nurses traded shifts, new faces entering his story briefly before fading. Veterans among them noticed strange occurrences. Fingers curling suddenly, eyelids fluttering, murmurs almost forming in his throat. They logged notes, debated if reflex or spark of more. Hope flickered among some, dismissed by others. Lorena never visited, not once. Having erased him from her conscience, she built her empire of soiree, hosting tables glittering with crystal, surrounded by people drawn by wealth, not by loyalty. She introduced herself with her remade name, unburdened by the man still breathing in a bed across town. But fate has peculiar patience. Embers that smolder unseen can erupt when least expected. 10 years into his silence, Raphael awoke. It wasn't instant. Awakening creeps like sunrise inching over mountains. First a finger twitch, then a groan, guttural and faint. Nurses nearly dismissed it until his eyes slowly pried open, pupils rolling across the room with confused searching. Excitement spilled through staff as they rushed to confirm. Days later, he lifted his arm weakly, seemed to nod with intent rather than chance. Weeks after, sounds became words. Broken at first, then legible. The first clear name he spoke, strained through torn throat, was Lorena. Doctors stared. He whispered again, "Lorena, T." He remembered. Imagine this, a decade vanishing in silence, yet memory of betrayal surviving unblurred. If it were you, waking after 10 years, what would be the very first words from your lips? Would you cry for family, ask what year it was, or would you call out the betrayer? Comment below. What's the first sentence you'd let escape? Rehabilitation forged Raphael anew. Muscles thinned by years resisted him like iron weights. Nurses held him as he trembled through every small step. Therapists coaxed his mouth around syllables as spit dribbled. But he gathered momentum like a storm regaining rhythm. His will was steel. Every small victory, standing, feeding himself, writing shaky notes, fueled a fire deeper than survival. Vengeance. Doctors commended determination, unaware of the force propelling him. They told him to focus on gratitude, to embrace second chances. He nodded politely, lips curling into faint smiles, but his thoughts repeated one image. Lorena, holding a glass bright red. News of Raphael's awakening spread. Communities buzzed. Isn't he the man who collapsed years ago? Wasn't he assumed gone? Expressions turned from pity for Lorena to confusion. She flinched as rumors carried to her luxurious halls. But Raphael stayed quiet, building strength. Not yet, he muttered to the few who urged him to confront openly. He needed strategy, proof, allies. Meet Lucia Delgado. 32, investigative journalist known for cutting through political facades. She sought him craving headline, but found instead a puzzle worth solving. Sitting across from Raphael, hearing his raspy voice outline betrayal, watching fury ignite in his tired eyes, she committed to his cause. Files surfaced, old laptop histories, financial records of anonymous chemical purchases through Lorena's lover, testimonies contradicting her timelines. Each discovery sharpened daggers pointed at her carefully curated image. Lucia, eager, pressed to release early. This could break her now. Raphael's voice, hoarse but steady. Not yet. Justice takes patience. She buried me alive 10 years. Now she will live 10 years of collapse. Do you believe survival itself is the greatest form of revenge? That living, breathing proof against a betrayer's intent crushes them more deeply than any jail cell could? Drop your thoughts below, because this, more than any headline, is the heartbeat of Raphael's story. In his home, modest as always, Raphael sat often by windows, staring outward at deserts stretching wide. 10 years had vanished from him, 10 birthdays, 10 summers, 10 winters never lived, and yet he inhaled air many assumed he never would again. Grief gnawed at lost time, but gratitude steadied him. Alone in thought, he whispered quietly, "She thought my silence eternal, but silence can wake." Lorena, meanwhile, woke each day not to delight, but despair stretched long. Paparazzi haunted her gates, shouts pierced her ears, demanding answers she could not craft. Lawyers drained her fortune, crowds mocked her name. Loneliness became her true companion, and thus she entered the very prison she avoided. Not of iron bars, but of whispering tongues, shuttered doors, shuttered hearts. She lived stripped of admiration, cursed by remembrance, tethered eternally to her crime. This is where we pause together, you and I, to reflect. What lesson breathes here? Should betrayal caution us to trust less, or should resilience remind us to treasure loyalty more? Drop your lessons below. And if you don't want to miss more untold true crime narratives like this, stories that challenge how we think about trust, loyalty, and revenge, then do the smart thing. Hit that subscribe button now, join True Crime Speaks, and let's keep uncovering shadows together. 10 years lost. But in exchange, Raphael built a symbol beyond bricks and mortar: resilience. Against Lorena's hunger for freedom, he carved his survival into a monument no poison could erase. Against betrayal's cut deepest, he bore scars proudly as proof not only of life, but of victory. Survival alone was not enough for him when he first opened his eyes. He wanted justice. And though courts did not imprison her, justice came. Her mask shattered, her wealth drained, her reputation decayed, and he, once silenced, spoke into eternity. Patience fueled him. His body, though frailer, was mending enough to maneuver freely. Every dawn he forced himself onto tracks near the hospital, starting slow, clinging to rails, then step by step jogging until his lungs burned. Locals spotted him, startled by the ghost they thought long buried. His eyes, once soft with kindness, carried a weight heavier than words. They whispered, "Rafael Cortez is alive." He resumed life publicly with humility. To neighbors he murmured thanks, saying perhaps God gave him a second chance. Privately, he assembled a dossier of proof. He cataloged every search term Lucia uncovered, every record of Lorena's finances, every witness who could contradict her story. He became methodical, file by file, photograph by photograph. Revenge was math to him now, calculated steps leading to inevitable result. Meanwhile, Lorena's empire trembled softly. She noticed invitations thinning. Parties no longer swelled with eager bodies. Whispered conversations ceased when she entered rooms. A headline appeared in a local paper. "Wealthy wife's former husband awakens." She denied quickly, insisted rumor. But doubt cut into her circle's trust. "Tell me right now, if you were Raphael, Would you have stormed into her mansion immediately, screaming truth? Or would you, like him, gnaw slowly at her walls until she collapsed from within? Drop in the comments. Fast strike or slow burn? Raphael thrived on the slow. He orchestrated leaks, anonymous tips to journalists aside from Lucia, scandalous hints suggesting her past was dirtier than her gown shimmered. Photos surfaced of her embrace with the man she later married, time-stamped days before Raphael's collapse. Evidence mounted not yet formally, but publicly enough to erode. Her new husband, once bravado, shrank. His social circle strained under whispers. He started vanishing from her side at events. Lorena noticed eyes prying differently. Not admiration, but accusation. And still Raphael waited. It wasn't until her isolation reached peak that he lunged legally. With help of an attorney, he filed civil lawsuits. Deliberate poisoning, fraud and asset collection. Civil cases lacked requirement of undeniable criminal evidence, but dragged her under deposition, sworn to answer. Papers nailed to her mansion gate drew photographers snapping images while she tried desperately to hide. Soon enough, courtroom lights replaced chandeliers. She sat rigid in sharp suits, eyes darting irregularly, voice faltering as lawyers revealed contradictions. Questions pierced. Why had she performed web searches days before his illness? Why had bank accounts transferred suspicious sums matching invoices for exotic compounds? Why had her grief dissolved into remarriage within months? And then one morning, mid-hearing, silence froze as the doors opened. Gasps thundered softly across benches. Raphael entered. Thinner, scarred, yet composed, he walked steady. Every eye locked on him. Lorena's jaw slipped. Her complexion washed pale. Her lips trembled. 10 years she believed him erased. He stopped, turned deliberately toward her, voice rasping yet sharp. You buried me alive, but the dead don't forget. Friends who once surrounded Lorena abandoned instantly. Headlines painted her downfall, the widow who lied. Tabloids ran exposures of her chemical searches, her affair overlap, her arrogant displays while he lingered near death in hospital tubes. Her husband abandoned ship, frightened of association. Banks froze accounts under suspicion of fraud. Wealth shriveled, reputation crushed, friendships dissolved. Walks outside her mansion drew glares, not smiles. Where once she cultivated admiration, she now endured public spitfires of contempt. She retained fragments of luxury clothing, but wore them in rooms empty of company. Now here's my question for you. If a betrayer like Lorena faced this collapse, do you think that was enough? Social punishment, financial ruin, or would true justice only have been handcuffs and prison bars? Which do you side with, disgrace or incarceration? Comment now. Though criminal convictions slipped away with dissolved evidence lost to time, civil judgments battered her thoroughly. Settlement demands stripped properties she had seized, accounts diminished. Her image crumbled into example. She lived but half alive, reputation murdered. For Raphael, triumph wasn't measured in money, but in reclaiming breath and dignity. He walked streets where once he was pitied, now greeted with solemn respect. His shoulders no longer bore only sweat stains but scars marking survival. Some approached quietly. We thought you gone, and yet here you are. He nodded, offering no bitterness, only the calm of one who endured.